Imagine you're just, sitting on your couch, you turn on the local evening news, and there's this classic feel-good segment playing.
Oh, right. The standard charity highlight reel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see a massive, those oversized novelty checks being handed over to a local food bank.
I know exactly the visual you mean.
Right. And the grocery store executives are there. They're smiling for the cameras. The volunteers are clapping. And the headline at the bottom of the screen is just praising the corporation for donating, I don't know, 20,000 pounds of unsold food.
Which, on the surface, looks fantastic.
Yeah, it totally does. It feels like this flawless, pure win-win. The store looks heroic, hungry people get fed, and all this edible food is saved from the landfill.
Yeah, it's a very comforting narrative.
It is. But today we're doing a deep dive into a source essay called Class Filter Inside Corporate Food Charity. And our mission today is to ask a really uncomfortable question. What if that cardboard donation bin at the front of your local supermarket isn't just, a vessel for pure, unadulterated charity?
Right. What if it's actually doing something else entirely?
Exactly. What if it is actually a highly sophisticated, financially lucrative tax mechanism?
And just putting that question out there, it completely shatters that comforting narrative we usually just accept without thinking.
It really does. I mean, we prefer our economic and charitable landscapes to be, neatly categorized, like good deeds belong in this box on the left and corporate profit belongs in this box on the right.
But the reality is much messier. The moment you actually look at the accounting ledgers or, the inventory management software.
The software is fascinating.
It really is. When you look at the tax codes driving these massive corporate donations, you realize those two sides, the charity and the profit, they are inextricably linked.
Yeah.
So today, we are going to decode the hidden machinery operating behind all those smiling press conferences. We're exploring a concept called value recovery.
Value recovery.
Right, and we're going to look at how this entire system relies on a very specific, almost invisible class filter.
I love when we get to take something so familiar, something you see every day, and just flip it completely upside down to look at the gears underneath. Because you, the listener, you've probably dropped a can of soup into one of those bins without a second thought. I know I have.
Oh, absolutely. We all have.
But to really understand the gears of this machine, we first need to agree on what exactly is in those donated boxes. And the source material draws a really hard line between two different types of discard.
Yes, the essay makes a crucial distinction between rotten trash and retail trash.
Okay, let's unpack this. Rotten trash versus retail trash.
This distinction is honestly the foundation of the entire corporate donation system. Let's start with the obvious one, rotten trash.
Right, the gross stuff.
Exactly. Rotten trash is biologically compromised. We're talking about, meat that has been left out of the cooler or produce that is literally visibly decaying.
Or like if a product gets recalled because of salmonella or something.
Precisely. It is fundamentally unsafe for human consumption. And nobody, and certainly not the author of our source essay, is suggesting that corporations should be donating rotten trash to food banks.
No, of course not. If it's biologically unsafe, it belongs in an industrial compost facility or a landfill. End of story.
Right. But then we get to the second category, retail trash. And this is a completely different beast.
Yeah, retail trash is food that is perfectly safe to eat. Like, biologically, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
None.
But it has been rejected by the store's primary inventory system for reasons that are, entirely aesthetic or promotional or economic.
Yeah, let's look at how a grocery store's back-of-house software actually flags an item as retail trash, because it's kind of wild. The system isn't running a chemical analysis on the food to see if it's safe.
Right, it's not a lab.
Exactly, it's running an economic algorithm. So imagine a manufacturer decides to rebrand. They change the color of their cereal box from blue to red.
Oh, I've seen this happen. Suddenly the packaging is completely different.
Right. And the moment that new red box hits the store's loading dock, all those blue boxes currently sitting on the shelf, they instantly become an economic liability.
Wow. Just because of the color.
Just because of the color.
Yeah.
The store doesn't want old branding sitting right next to new branding because it confuses the premium shopper. They want a uniform, perfect display.
Or what about damaged packaging?
That's a huge one. An item might have packaging that got slightly dented by a forklift in the warehouse. The internal seal isn't broken, the food is totally safe, but it just fails that visual freshness standard of the primary market.
That's like a bookstore. I was thinking about this when I read the essay. Imagine walking into a really high-end bookstore, and there's this pristine stack of brand new hardcover novels on the front display table.
Okay, I'm with you.
And one of those books has a tiny, microscopic tear in the corner of the paper dust jacket.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the words printed on the pages inside are exactly the same. The
Yep.
plot hasn't changed. The book is completely functional. But the store manager pulls that specific book off the display because a customer who is paying full retail price will absolutely refuse to buy the torn one when a perfect one is sitting right underneath it.
That is the perfect analogy. The book is still a book, but it has become retail trash.
Exactly. And the crazy part is, if the product isn't biologically bad, why does it suddenly become a charitable gift rather than just, a discounted product?
Well, the law actually codifies that exact bookstore scenario,
Oh.
but specifically for food.
There's a law for this.
Oh, yeah. The legal architecture protecting this whole system is called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act.
Okay, I've heard of the Good Samaritan Act, but I don't know the details.
The language in it is fascinating. It explicitly protects the donation of what it calls, quote, apparently wholesome food that is, quote, not readily marketable.
Wait, freeze on that phrase. Not readily marketable.
Yeah. The law actually defines that phrase. It states that food can meet all federal quality and labeling standards. It can be perfectly wholesome, but it is considered unmarketable due to appearance, age, freshness, grade, size, surplus, or similar conditions.
So it's a legal recognition that food can be biologically alive, but economically dead to a premium buyer.
That is exactly what it is. It's economically dead.
And I think, for you listening, the most common way we all experience this economic death is just standing in front of our own refrigerators, staring at expiration dates.
Oh, the great expiration date panic.
Right. You look at a carton of milk or, a tub of yogurt, and it says sell by or best before with a date, and you have absolutely no idea if eating it on Thursday instead of Tuesday is going to send you to the hospital.
Which is such a massive misconception. The source essay actually points out that the USDA clearly states that, with the sole exception of infant formula, these dates are almost entirely unregulated for safety at the federal level.
Wait, really? They aren't about safety?
No, not at all. They are manufacturer guidelines for peak quality. A best by date is simply the brand's culinary promise to the consumer.
A culinary promise.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. The manufacturer is basically saying, we only guarantee that our potato chips will be maximally crunchy until this specific Tuesday.
Wow.
It has absolutely nothing to do with pathogens or food poisoning. It's purely a tool for brand protection and managing their inventory flow.
So if we take that confusion that you and I feel in our own kitchens and we scale it up to a multi-billion-dollar corporate retail level, we hit this massive question.
Which is?
If this retail trash isn't actually worthless, if it's biologically safe and simply past its absolute peak profit potential, where does the remaining value go? Because food doesn't just evaporate.
No, it doesn't. Food descends.
Descends. Okay, explain that.
The source essay maps out something called the cheap food ladder. It argues that food doesn't just move randomly. It follows a very rigid economic staircase, moving from the wealthiest consumers down to the poorest, step by step by step.
Okay, let's trace a physical product down that ladder so we can really visualize it. Let's say a manufacturer produces a massive pallet of brand name, premium Summerberry Burst yogurt.
I like Summerberry Burst. Good visual.
Thanks. So where does this pallet start its journey?
The very top rung of the ladder is the premium channel. This pallet is loaded onto a refrigerated truck and sent to a high-end, brightly lit grocery store in a very affluent zip code.
Right, the fancy store with the nice lighting.
Exactly. The presentation is flawless. The yogurt is stocked at eye level. The best buy date is, say, 3 weeks away. The wealthy consumer meets the food here, and they are paying the absolute maximum retail margin before any downgrade has occurred.
Okay, but let's say the store manager overordered, a couple of weeks pass, and the yogurt hasn't sold out. The best buy date is now only 5 days away.
Right.
The store manager's inventory scanner flags the pallet. It can no longer be sold at full price to a premium customer because that customer expects a 3-week shelf life.
So now the yogurt drops to the second rung of the ladder, the markdown channel.
Ah, the clearance section.
Exactly. The store prints out those bright orange or yellow, reduced for quick sales stickers. They slash the price by maybe 30%, and they move the yogurt to a special little section in the back of the cooler.
Yeah, I always check that section.
Most people do. They're trying to capture a completely different demographic of shopper now, someone who is price sensitive and willing to trade a shorter shelf life for a discount.
Okay, but let's say it still doesn't sell. There are only 3 days left on the date now. What happens next? Does it go straight to the dumpster?
Not yet. If the volume of the product is large enough, it drops to the third rung, the discount or salvage channel.
The salvage channel.
Yeah. There is an entire secondary industry of surplus grocery stores, bargain outlets, and liquidators. The premium store basically sells the remaining yogurt to a liquidator for pennies on the dollar.
Correct.
Then the liquidator puts it on their own shelves, usually in a much lower income neighborhood. And the FDA explicitly allows this, by the way. Surplus, salvaged, and near-date foods are entirely legal to sell at discount prices.
Okay, let me stop you right there because I want to play devil's advocate for the listener for a
Just
second.
for it.
If a discount grocery store buys this yogurt and resells it to a price-sensitive shopper who is just looking for a deal, isn't that just a totally functional, normal economic market at work?
Sure, it's basic economics.
Right. The premium store recoups a tiny fraction of their cost, the liquidator makes a small profit margin, and a low-income shopper gets brand-name yogurt for cheap. So why is the donation part of this the big issue?
That's the crux of it. The essay isn't actually criticizing the salvage market itself. It uses the salvage market to prove a critical point about the fourth rung down the ladder, which is the donation channel.
Okay, how so?
Well, because the liquidator is willing to pay cold, hard cash for that yogurt, we have absolute, undeniable proof that the food retains financial value.
Right, it's an asset.
Exactly. It is a financial asset. So if a corporate grocery chain chooses to bypass the liquidator and instead routes that yogurt to a food pantry, we have to recognize that they are not giving away nothing.
Oh, I see.
They are making a very calculated financial decision to choose one value pathway over another. The author asks this piercing question. Why do we call it shrewd business when rejected inventory is sold to a liquidator for cheap, but we magically call it selfless charity when the exact same inventory is boxed up and handed to poor people for free?
Oh, wow. That really reframes it. So the issue isn't the food itself, it's the framing. We are basically applying a moral filter to a supply chain logistic.
Yes. And that filter maps perfectly onto physical geography.
Geography, like where the stores are located?
Exactly. The essay references the USDA's Food Access Research Atlas. This atlas literally tracks the physical locations of supermarkets across the country.
Okay.
And what it shows is that wealthy census tracts experience a highly curated, premium food system. But low-income census tracts are geographically saturated with discount stores, dollar stores, and food pantries.
That makes sense.
So the physical movement of this downgraded yogurt across a city literally mirrors the wealth disparity of that city. The rich meet food before the downgrade, and the poor meet food after the downgrade.
That is just, it's bleak when you lay it out like that. But I want to get into the raw math of this. Why would a corporation actively choose the donation pathway over the liquidator pathway if the liquidator is offering cash?
To understand that, we need to look at a real-world case study. The essay brings up the state tax code in Nebraska.
Right, Nebraska. Now, why Nebraska?
Nebraska is the perfect laboratory for this analysis because it is a foundational pillar of the American food supply. I mean, it is a massive agricultural hub, a national leader in beef production, corn, agricultural processing.
Right, it's a total breadbasket state.
Exactly. They generate staggering amounts of calories. But despite all that agricultural wealth, the food system there is still bifurcated by class. And the state government has designed a specific policy to incentivize exactly this latter we're talking about.
Yeah, the essay talks about a policy for the tax years 2025 and 2026. It allows grocery retailers, restaurants, and agricultural producers to apply for a non-refundable state tax credit when they donate food to a food bank or a rescue organization.
And here is where the brilliance of the essay really shines, because it zeroes in on the bureaucratic fine print of that exact tax credit.
The fine print is always where the secrets are.
Always. To claim this benefit, the state's official FAQ mandates that the donated food must be valued at, quote, wholesale value.
Okay, wholesale value. Let's flag that.
It also requires that any amount the corporation already claimed as a federal charitable contribution has to be added back into the determination of their Nebraska taxable income before this specific state credit can be applied.
Okay, wait, hold on. Add it again. Wholesale value. I think I need an accountant to translate that.
It gets dense, for sure.
Let's do it explain, like I'm 5 here. Walk me through the actual math. Let's take our hypothetical pallet of Summerberry Burst yogurt again.
Okay, let's run the audit.
So let's say the grocery store originally bought that huge pallet from the manufacturer for a wholesale price of $1,000. They plan to sell it at retail for $2,000. But now it's 5 days from expiration. What are the manager's actual options mathematically?
Okay. Option 1. The manager just throws the whole pallet in the dumpster behind the store.
Okay.
The store loses the initial $1,000 investment they paid for the yogurt, plus they have to pay a commercial waste hauler maybe $50 in tipping fees to physically take that garbage to the landfill.
Right, so their net loss is $1,050. That's a terrible option.
It is. So option 2. The manager calls a salvage liquidator. The liquidator knows the yogurt is dying. It's only got 5 days left, so they offer a rock bottom price. They offer $100 for the whole pallet.
Okay.
The store avoids the dumpster fee, and they get $100 cash back. So their net loss is $900. Better, but still financially painful.
Right. Okay, but now let's look at option 3, the donation tax mechanism. The manager calls the local food bank. A brightly painted food rescue truck rolls up to the loading dock and takes the pallet off their hands for free. What happens on the accountant's ledger?
This is where those words wholesale value become absolutely magical. Because the yogurt was perfectly edible when it was donated, the Nebraska tax code allows the corporation to value that donation not at the $100 salvage price, but at the original $1,000 wholesale price.
Wait, really? Even though there is absolutely no way they could have ever recovered $1,000 for it on the open market at that point in its life cycle?
Correct. The state essentially allows them to create a phantom value for the purpose of the tax credit.
That is wild.
And it gets better because the federal government is also involved. Under IRS Publication 526, businesses can claim federal deductions for charitable contributions of food inventory.
Okay, how does the federal side work?
The rules are complex, but they often allow a deduction equal to the basis of the property, which is what they paid for it, plus half of the unrealized appreciation.
Plus half the unrealized appreciation.
Right, and it's capped by a specific net income limit, often 15% of the taxpayer's aggregate net income for that year.
Okay, ELI 5, that IRS jargon for me. What does basis of the property plus half the unrealized appreciation actually look like in dollars?
It means the federal government allows the business to deduct the $1,000 they paid for the yogurt, plus half of the profit they would have made if they had sold it at full retail.
Oh, wow.
So if the retail price was $2,000, the projected profit would have been $1,000. Half of that is $500. So the federal deduction could theoretically be calculated against a value of $1,500.
A value of $1,500 for a pallet of yogurt that a liquidator would only pay $100 for.
Yeah.
That's just mind-blowing.
It is. Now, Nebraska steps in and says, well, you can't double dip perfectly. That is what that add-back provision means.
Right, the state add back.
The state says if you reduced your federal taxable income using that massive federal deduction, you have to mathematically add that amount back to your state income ledger before calculating your state tax credit.
Okay, so they try to rein it in a little bit.
A little bit. But even with that restriction to prevent total double dipping, the combined effect is massive. You've got federal deductions, state tax credits based on wholesale value, and the complete elimination of waste disposal fees. It creates a very, very powerful financial package.
So the corporate accountant looks at the spreadsheet and says, look, if we sold the liquidator, we get $100. But if we donate it, we wipe out our disposal fees, we generate a massive write-down against our corporate tax burden, and our net financial position is actually stronger than if we sold it for pennies.
Exactly. And that realization introduces what I think is the most critical philosophical distinction in the entire source text.
What's that?
The profound difference between charity and value recovery.
Yes. I really want to spend some time here, because understanding this completely redefines how we view corporate behavior. The author argues that true charity requires giving from your treasure.
Giving from your treasure, yes.
Yeah. It requires sacrifice. Like if you own an asset that is currently generating maximum value for you and you choose to give it away instead of profiting from it, that is charity. You actually felt the cost of the gift.
Right. There is a tangible loss to the giver. But value recovery is an entirely different operational mode. Value recovery occurs when an asset has lost its primary market value.
Like our dying yogurt.
Exactly. The yogurt is no longer treasure. It is an economic liability. Value recovery is just the logistical process of finding secondary alternative ways to extract benefit from a depreciating asset.
You know, this totally reminds me of doing a massive closet clean out.
Oh, that's good comparison.
Let's think about it. Let's say you, the listener, you go into your closet and you find a bunch of heavy winter coats that you haven't worn in 5 years. They're just taking up physical space.
Yep.
So you box them up, you drive them down to a donation center, you drop them off, and the attendant hands you a blank tax receipt. You fill it out, you claim a deduction on your personal taxes, and your closet is finally organized. Now, did you buy those coats 5 years ago with the intention of sacrificing them to the needy?
Obviously not.
No. You bought them to keep yourself warm. And did you donate them today because you wanted to make a painful personal sacrifice? No. You wanted your closet space back, and the tax write-off was just a nice financial bonus.
It's an excellent metaphor, but let's extend it to match the corporate reality because it gets darker.
Okay, extend it.
Imagine if, after cleaning out your closet and getting your tax receipt, you immediately hired a PR firm to issue a press release to the local newspaper.
Oh, geez.
Local resident heroically clothes the needy with major winter apparel donation. You pose for a photo with the box of old coats. Your neighbors applaud your incredible generosity.
I would look like a massive hypocrite, like a total narcissist. But that is exactly what corporations are doing on an industrial scale.
It is.
They are managing their inventory shrink, they're clearing out their back rooms, they're actively avoiding landfill fees, taking the tax write-offs, and then after all of that, they're holding a press conference to accept a moral halo for their quote-unquote charity.
Now, the author is very careful to maintain nuance here, which is important. The essay points out that doing something socially useful, like feeding people or keeping textiles out of a landfill,
Right.
that is not mutually exclusive with benefiting yourself.
Right, it's not a zero-sum game.
Exactly. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, actually has this thing called the Wasted Food Scale. It's a tiered guide for how society should handle surplus food.
What does the scale say?
The EPA prioritizes feeding hungry people second only to preventing the waste from occurring in the first place. So the physical outcome of the donation is good. It is undeniably better than a landfill. But a good physical outcome does not magically transform the donor's intent into pure, selfless sacrifice. The corporation is recovering value. They are optimizing their losses.
Right.
The friction arises because they demand to be viewed as philanthropists while they are operating as ruthless optimizers.
And if they are acting as ruthless optimizers, pushing this downgraded near-date food into the charity pipeline, I have to ask, why aren't they terrified of the legal liability?
Liability.
Yeah. If I run a grocery store and I donate yogurt that is 3 days away from expiring and it sits on a food bank shelf and someone eventually eats it and gets terribly sick, my corporate lawyers should be having a heart attack about the potential lawsuit.
And this brings us right back to the legal shield we discussed earlier, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act.
Right, the apparently wholesome law.
Yes. We mentioned that it protects the donation of unmarketable food, but the law contains a specific, honestly devastating clause regarding who must receive that food for the shield to activate.
Wait, the shield doesn't just cover everything.
No. The law protects the donor from civil and criminal liability only when the food is donated in good faith to a nonprofit for ultimate distribution to, quote, needy individuals.
Needy individuals.
Right.
So the legal shield is conditional on the poverty of the end user.
Exactly. The law literally codifies a class filter into the legal protection.
Wow.
Food that loses its primary market status, food that a full price-paying customer would reject, suddenly gains this protected, lawsuit-proof charity status, but only if you feed it to poor people.
That is incredibly stark. It's
Yeah.
almost hard to hear. And it leads to a concept in the essay that I found absolutely fascinating called the restaurant inversion.
Yes, the restaurant inversion.
Because if this food is perfectly safe, if it's apparently wholesome, like the law says, why is it only flowing to food pantries? Why isn't, I don't know, a local restaurant buying this near-date inventory at a massive discount and cooking it up for their dinner service to save money?
Because the premium food service industry operates under an entirely different set of rules. Think about a mid-tier, fast casual dining chain.
Like a big burger chain or something.
Right. They're strictly governed by FDA and CDC food codes. If a health inspector walks into their kitchen, the restaurant manager has to produce highly detailed traceability logs.
To prove where everything came from.
Exactly. They have to prove exactly where the chicken came from, what temperature it was transported at, and precisely when it expires. They rely on absolute supplier consistency.
Right. If I go to a burger chain in New York, I expect it to taste exactly like the burger chain in Los Angeles. They need predictable, uniform ingredients to maintain that.
And a restaurant simply cannot build a consistent menu around the unpredictable, randomized, near-date cast-offs of a grocery store. They cannot underrate the risk of feeding their paying customers salvage food.
Because if a paying customer gets food poisoning.
The restaurant's brand is completely destroyed, and they are sued into oblivion because the Good Samaritan Act does not protect commercial sales. It only protects donations to the needy.
So, if I'm understanding this dynamic correctly, the corporate food system recognizes that near-date downgraded food carries a slightly elevated risk profile, right? And it lacks the presentation quality required for premium sales.
Correct.
So the premium restaurants say, we refuse to take on that risk for our paying customers. And the grocery stores say, we refuse to keep it on our shelves for our paying customers. But society collectively agrees that it is perfectly acceptable to push that exact same risk onto people standing in a food pantry line.
The author summarizes this entire dynamic with a single brutal sentence. The rich meet food as presentation. The poor meet food as recovery.
Let me just repeat that.
Yeah.
The rich meet food as presentation. The poor meet food as recovery.
It is the implicit contract of the entire American food system.
Yeah.
When the consumer is wealthy, they are protected by CDC codes, bright lights, aesthetic perfection, and brand liability. But when the consumer has no economic leverage, they are expected to act as the absorption mechanism for the inputs that the premium system rejects. The digestive tracts of the poor are literally expected to process the corporate surplus.
Which brings us to the psychological toll this takes on the actual human beings navigating the system. Because it's not just about calories. The essay argues that the words we use to describe this process act as a camouflage, hiding the absolute indignity of that contract.
Yes, the author is highly critical of the term food rescue. It is the dominant buzzword in the nonprofit hunger relief sector right now.
A food rescue. You hear it everywhere.
Everywhere. And the phrase is designed to project a moral halo. It paints the corporation as a heroic lifeguard pulling a drowning victim from the ocean.
But what are they actually rescuing?
Exactly. They are just moving their own over-ordered inventory from their own warehouse to a tax-deductible endpoint.
They aren't lifeguards. They are warehouse managers.
Precisely. And when we use language like food rescue to launder business logistics into moral victories, we violate what the author calls the dignity standard.
The dignity standard. Define that for us.
The dignity standard states a very simple, profound truth. Poor people are not disposal infrastructure. They are not human landfills designed to help the retail economy clean out its back rooms.
Think about the contrast in the lived experience here.
Yeah.
When you, the listener, walk into a premium grocery store, you are treated like royalty.
Oh, absolutely.
The aisles are wide. The lighting is literally engineered to make the apples look perfectly red. If you want a gallon of milk, you look at the dates and you have the complete autonomy to reach all the way to the back of the cooler to grab the jug that expires a week later than the ones in the front.
You have absolute power, endless choice, and complete dignity as a consumer.
Now contrast that with the physical and psychological experience of the pantry recipient. They wait in a line, often outside, often visible to passing traffic. And when they finally reach the front, they do not get to browse. They are handed a pre-packed cardboard box. And inside that box is an entirely randomized assortment of whatever the local grocery stores couldn't sell that week.
Just a grab bag of rejected items.
Right. It might be 3 jars of discontinued pumpkin spice salsa, a dented box of generic oats, and yogurt that expires tomorrow. They have zero choice, zero autonomy, and worst of all, society expects them to be profoundly, vocally grateful for receiving the scraps.
Because hunger doesn't cancel human dignity. Just because someone needs calories doesn't mean they forfeit the right to freshness or choice or respect.
Exactly. But I know that if I were to say this out loud at a dinner party, people would lose their minds.
Right.
If I played devil's advocate for a second, the immediate reaction to this critique is usually defensive anger.
Yeah.
People think you are attacking the concept of charity itself.
The author completely anticipates that exact defensive reaction. The final section of the essay is basically a masterclass in building an intellectual firewall against sloppy, reactive criticism.
Okay, how does it do that?
It establishes a strict rule of engagement for anyone talking about this topic. Ask, but do not accuse.
Ask, but do not accuse.
Oh.
I really appreciate that rule, because if you just run around screaming that local grocery managers are evil masterminds committing insurance fraud, you just sound like a conspiracy theorist, and nobody will listen to you.
Exactly. The essay explicitly warns against accusing companies of double-dipping or outright fraud unless you are holding the physical receipts. You need the inventory write-down logs, the spoilage reports, and the state tax filings to prove malfeasance.
Right.
The goal here isn't to accuse individuals of crimes. The goal is to analyze the structural incentives of the system itself.
So let's organically work through the immediate counter-arguments people throw out when they hear this critique, because they are predictable. The first one is always the most aggressive. Well, what do you want them to do? Would you rather they just throw the food in the landfill?
It's the ultimate false choice.
It totally is.
It is a logical fallacy designed to shut down the conversation completely. The answer obviously is no. Feeding human beings is vastly superior to burying edible food in a landfill. Nobody argues otherwise.
Right.
But better than a landfill is a profoundly low bar to clear. And clearing that exceptionally low bar does not automatically grant the corporation immunity from criticism, nor does it prove they're acting out of pure sacrificial charity. You can demand honest language without demanding more waste.
Okay, counter-argument 2. But the food is perfectly safe. We just spent 20 minutes explaining that retail trash is biologically fine, so why are we complaining?
Because safety is not a synonym for dignity. A dented, near-date can of soup is safe. But systematically routing all the dented, near-date cans to one specific socioeconomic class while reserving the pristine cans for another class is an indignity.
Yeah.
The argument isn't about pathogens. It is about the social messaging embedded in the supply chain. Need is not permission to lower the standard of respect.
Well said. All right, counter-argument 3, and this one is usually brought up by the policy wonks. Look, we need these tax incentives to encourage donation. Without the financial benefit, corporations just wouldn't bother dealing with the logistics of donating, and the food would go to the landfill.
That counter-argument is fascinating because it accidentally proves the essay's entire thesis.
How so?
Think about it. If a corporation absolutely requires a state tax credit and a federal IRS deduction to be persuaded to part with their surplus food, then they are explicitly proving that their primary motivation is financial, not charitable.
Oh, they just admit it.
Yes, they are responding to a market incentive. They are recovering value. They just admitted the whole premise out loud.
It's the cry it part out loud. And this leads to what I think is the most enraging part of the whole structure. The public subsidy. Because a tax deduction doesn't exist in a vacuum, right?
No, it doesn't.
It's like, imagine my neighbor has a garage full of junk. It's an eyesore. He doesn't want to pay a junk removal company to haul it away.
Yeah.
So I go over to his house, I hand him a $100 bill out of my own wallet, and I say, here, I'll subsidize you to clean out your own garage.
Right.
He cleans it out, he avoids the hauling fee, he pockets my $100, and then the local newspaper writes a front-page story calling him a hero for beautifying the neighborhood. I literally paid for his PR win.
That is precisely how the tax code functions here. When a massive grocery conglomerate reduces its state or federal tax burden by claiming wholesale value on donated retail trash, the public treasury absorbs that loss.
Yeah?
The tax revenue that would have gone to schools or roads or public health is reduced. The public is implicitly subsidizing the corporation's inventory management. And because public tax dollars are underwriting this value recovery, the public has an absolute, undeniable right to demand total transparency.
So what does that transparency look like in practice? Because the essay doesn't just complain. It actually offers some concrete solutions, which I love.
It does.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful proposed solutions is a mandatory markdown first policy.
Markdown first. How would that work?
If a corporation is going to claim a public tax deduction for donating an item, they should be required to prove that they first offered that exact item to the local community at a steep markdown. If the yogurt is still valuable enough to generate a state tax credit, why wasn't it offered at a 75% discount to the struggling single mother who was shopping in the store the day before?
That is brilliant. It forces the corporation to attempt a true market transaction before retreating to the publicly subsidized charity pipeline.
Exactly. Another solution focuses on the documentation itself. What if the receipts handed out by food banks and the tax forms filed with the IRS were required to aggressively distinguish between the original retail value, the heavily depreciated salvage value, and the avoided disposal costs?
Imagine the impact of that data. Just imagine if the people standing in the pantry line could see a label on the box of food that read, "This item was rejected by Store X because the branding changed. It was written off at a wholesale value of $5 for a corporate tax credit, saving the store $2 in dumpster fees, and was finally shipped here."
It would completely shatter the illusion. It forces everyone involved to acknowledge the cheap food ladder for what it really is.
It really does. The demand of the essay is actually incredibly straightforward when you get down to it. It isn't demanding that corporations stop feeding people.
No.
It is demanding that we stop hiding a ruthless system of corporate value recovery behind the soft, glowing language of pure charity.
This has been a massive journey today. We've climbed up and down the cheap food ladder.
We really have. We started at the very top, in the brightly lit aisles with the premium-paying customers. We watched the food fall through the markdown and salvage channels.
We audited the Nebraska tax code to see how a $100 pallet of near-date yogurt gets magically transformed into a $1,000 wholesale tax write-off.
We examined the Good Samaritan Act, and we looked at the core concept of human dignity. So, if we synthesize all the mechanics we've uncovered today, what is the final takeaway?
The final conclusion is clear. The true friction in our food system isn't about expiration dates or whether near-date food is dangerous. The friction is entirely about framing and power. We have engineered a highly efficient logistical system that places poor people at the absolute bottom of an economic funnel. They are forced to absorb the downgraded, rejected surplus of the premium market. And the ultimate insult is that this structural downgrade is aggressively rebranded as corporate generosity, allowing the very corporations that rejected the food to reap public praise and private financial reward.
Retail trash wrapped in a moral halo. Value recovery disguised as a sacrificial gift.
We just have to mature our perspective. We can acknowledge that keeping food out of a landfill is physically beneficial, while simultaneously refusing to pretend that a corporation has made a pure, selfless sacrifice when they are actively harvesting tax benefits, zeroing out disposal fees, and printing positive PR.
So to you, our listener, the next time you walk into your local grocery store, I want you to actively change how you look at the physical space around you. Look at the pristine end cap displays. Look at the clearance rack tucked away by the dairy coolers.
Look at the cardboard donation bin by the exit doors.
Exactly. And the next time you turn on the evening news and see a giant novelty check being handed to a food bank, don't just clap. Ask yourself the questions we mapped out today. Who had access to this food before the downgrade? Who is being forced to accept it after the downgrade? And most critically, whose tax dollars are rewarding the corporation for moving it from point A to point B?
Analyzing the system through that specific lens is what transforms us from passive consumers of corporate PR into critical thinkers demanding a truly dignified food system.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative hypothetical to turn over in your mind. We've established that your public tax dollars are underwriting this corporate value recovery. We are collectively paying to keep this machine running. What if we are inadvertently funding the exact mechanism that enforces this class divide?
That is the ultimate structural question.
Imagine if, tomorrow morning, your city council passed a radical new ordinance. The law states that local food pantries are no longer legally allowed to accept near-date, dented, or cosmetically flawed inventory.
Okay.
They are only allowed to accept premium first-tier food, the exact same quality of food that sits on the front display of the highest-end grocery store in town.
That would be a fascinating stress test of the system's true motives.
It really would. If that law passed, what would happen to those massive corporate donations? Would the grocery executives still show up with the novelty checks and the news cameras, eager to sacrifice their pristine high-margin treasure?
Probably not.
Or would the donations dry up completely instantly overnight? Because if the donations stopped the moment the corporations could no longer offload their depreciating retail trash, wouldn't that definitively prove that this massive multi-billion-dollar system was never really about charity in the first place?
It absolutely would.
It makes you look at that can of soup in the donation bin entirely differently. It's not just soup. It's a tiny, edible gear in a massive economic engine. Keep asking the hard questions. Keep looking at the ledgers, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.